you are this interesting enigma in this space who's looking at productivity from a different lens. And as someone who is ambitious, like you have multiple businesses,
Hmm.
you wouldn't be doing this if you weren't highly effective. But I also get a sense from your content that it's very intentional. There is a focus on some balance and on creating the life you want. Doesn't mean you're hustling all the time.
Right.
So I'd love to dive into that today. Like, what does this look like for you?
I think for me, it's a natural inclination to always go towards hustle mode. And that's what I constantly have to rein in. And I think that's why I talk about it a lot, is because I'm trying to drill it into my own head as well, because I'm not perfect at it. And it may look like there's this super balanced life, but I think what I've created is what is my ideal. And that's what I encourage people to create. You can create your ideal because you're always going to have that base template, your base routine for the week, your base morning routine, your base evening routine. And just getting into knowing what you're getting back to, I guess, when you kind of stray away from that helps out. But I constantly have to remind myself that this isn't a race. Life isn't about just like the constant work, because I know in myself that leads to significant burnout. I've had burnout multiple times in my life, sometimes worse than others. And it always results in me kind of saying no to a lot of things to be able to get myself back into a place where I can start to take on things again. And so what I really try to do is avoid getting to that point. And the biggest thing that has helped me is we've kind of already talked about it with the prioritization of knowing more of what's actually important to do, and also aligning your tasks with your energy and capacity levels, and kind of being intuitive with yourself and knowing what you can handle today. But it is a constant process, a constant journey. And I think what I'd like to see is, because I kind of, with hustle culture, you cannot sustain it long term at all. No, no, I don't believe anyone can.
Yeah.
But I think you can. There are seasons of life where maybe you have a product launch or a big project that you're doing where you can put in sort of like a seasonal hustle,
Yeah.
knowing that there's an end, that it's not lasting forever. And I think that's important to understand too, is that sometimes we're in a really busy time of life and we just got to get through that project, and then we can kind of take a step back. And I think what happens is people finish that project and then they start something else that's like equally as big. They don't give themselves that break.
I know you've been someone who's planned for a long time. Like the way you
Mm-hmm.
approach your businesses and your life seems very systematic and you have
Yes.
a lot of plans. But previously, you used to do it on paper. And I think
Mm-hmm.
looking through some of your older content, that paper planner was always such a pivotal
Yeah.
tool for you.
It's so I've always used a paper planner, and then I stumbled into bullet journaling, and I did that for quite a few years. And I was so deep into it because it was just such a customizable system. I loved the tactile feel. I could use the stickers and washi and make the pages whatever I want. And that actually helped my brand kind of explode, actually, is people
Yeah.
were looking at my bullet journal pages and thinking, oh, like I want to learn how to do that. And so I spent probably 3 or 4 years teaching that. And then it got to the place where, and this happens a lot with people in like any planning tool, you start to get some friction and things don't go as easy as they did before. Maybe your needs change. I'm always saying, like, your life is so seasonal. And I know I've like mentioned that before, even in this interview, because you either have, a lot of stuff happening in one season, you move to the next, it's maybe a little bit lighter. Your planning needs are going to change based on that. So I found myself just like feeling a lot of friction, writing things down, duplicating tasks. And I'm like, this is not working. And so that's when I started to lean in a little bit into the digital planning. I started with Google Calendar, and just kind of as an addition to my bullet journal, I kind of was tiptoeing into it. And then I discovered Notion. And so I started again transferring things that I would normally put in my bullet journal into
Mhm.
Notion. And then when I found Morgan that kind of combined the two, like
Yeah.
everything I loved about a digital calendar and everything I loved about keeping my life organized in Notion, then that just seemed like the perfect mix and gave me, I think, a good reason to finally jump ship on the paper planning. And when I started sharing it with my audience, they were really excited about it too, because they were also, I think, on a very similar journey where their paper planner just wasn't cutting it anymore.
Yeah.
And they needed something that was very mobile on their device, that updated quickly, things that even their family members could access. So it just seemed like a really good transition point where I started to shift my business. I still have those old blog posts on there about bullet journaling because there's still a hardcore amount of
Yeah.
people that love it. And like it helped me for about, 3, 4 years. So I still love the system. But right now, I'm definitely a Norgan, or so nice to
And
put
Morgan.
it together. Norgan, Notion and Morgan combo.
Yeah. How has your approach to planning evolved as you've grown the business to be your full-time job?
Yeah, it's definitely less rigid and more flexibility, kind of like what we were just talking about, where I
Mhm.
really have to assess also what is the major priority this week, what absolutely has to get done, and what else can kind of fall by the wayside. I always used to think that everything was equally important, and that's very tough to plan because if
Yeah.
you have 30 things for the week that are all equally important, it's just not going to fit in. You're not going to have that time for rest and rejuvenation either. So I do a lot of like the prioritizing. All right, what is the absolute, like, what is my one focus for the week? I kind of pick
Mhm.
that out so that when I get to the end of the week, making sure that I've done that one focus makes me feel like I'm a success for that week, even if I didn't do some of the other things. And then what are the super high priority things? What are those? I'm sure you've heard the phrase, what are the glass balls that you do not want to drop? Drop the plastic ones
Mhm.
because
I
they'll
haven't
bounce.
heard that
You
before, actually.
haven't?
I like
Yeah,
that.
so
No.
they'll bounce and you can pick them up later. And so I'm kind of assessing in my brain, what is a glass ball? What is a plastic ball? Maybe that's a
Yeah.
little weird analogy, but it really helps
No.
me know like what I need to focus on first.
But so you have two different businesses. How do you make
Mhm.
those trade-offs?
It's very, very seasonal. So the travel
Mm.
business is seasonal, and even though that we publish still every week a video, it ramps up a lot in the summer. And because the summer travel season, the summer people are taking their RVs out. And so we're actually shooting a lot more content. The weather is great. So I find myself focusing more on that business in the summer,
Yeah.
putting my business, some of the things on hold a little bit. Last summer when we were in Alaska, I think I went down from a weekly newsletter to a once a month newsletter just so I still had a touch point with my audience, but it wasn't as often. Right now, I'm sort of in the season where I needed to step back from YouTube for a little bit on my personal brand to be able to focus on ramping up the travel brand. So it's
Mhm.
really just this, there's no, you can't look at both businesses and say like I'm going to do equal like effort for all of these things, all of these platforms.
Yeah.
What I've learned is that it's just this, okay, sometimes I'm focusing on this business a little bit more and this one not as much, and then it shifts a little bit, especially when I have a launch. Maybe I'm launching a new Notion template, then my focus kind of goes over here and we do a little bit less on the travel brand. So it's always assessing and trying to figure out what is going to be the balance this week. There's just
Yeah.
nothing set in stone. Try all the like people share, oh, this works great for me. This works great for me. Or I try this and like try it all. Try the Pomodoro technique. Try theme days. Try it all and see what resonates with
Yeah.
you and works best.
When you hear from people who are feeling overwhelmed or ineffective, um, like what is a small shift you often recommend people try to make that
Mm,
may help them get out of it? Because I
yeah.
see people are looking to you for that. How
Yeah.
do you acknowledge those conversations?
Yeah, and that's such an honor to honestly have a community like that, because I see myself in them so much too, and I think
Mhm.
for me and what I recommend is when I'm super overwhelmed, it's usually because there's a lot going on in my brain that is and when it's in your brain, it's not tangible. And it can just really drive you nuts. You're not able to think clearly. It's really crowded with a lot of thoughts. So just getting everything on paper, just honestly brain dumping. You can do this on a schedule. Some people I know do it on like a week. It's part of their weekly routine. I do it when my brain just feels really full and
Mm.
I just get it out on paper. It's not even necessarily tasks. Some of them are tasks, them are things that I'm thinking that I need to do. Others are ideas that I've had that I'm just kind of rolling around in there. But I think getting it on something permanent on paper, or you can brain dump it in Notion or whatever, is just going to take it out of your brain and you know it's captured. And so you're immediately going to feel less overwhelmed because you know that it's someplace where you can reference that. I think we keep the stuff rolling around in our brain because we're afraid we're going to forget it.